What is this, huh? Cleaning the bathroom? Or did you drop out of law school to work as a fancy janitor? I was idly scrubbing a filthy sink in a facility's restroom when an old acquaintance of mine happened to walk in and made fun of me with those remarks. I used to think of you as a rival, but I guess I was way off. All he did was scoff at me, even though it had been years since we last met. He was always this kind of guy, I thought, holding a rag in my hand, and I couldn't help but be shocked when I told him what I was really doing. His reaction caught him off guard. He was unable to speak and was left speechless. My name is Mike. Ever since I was a kid, I've always had a strong sense of justice. Compared to other kids, I loved playing hero games with my classmates, and I always took on the role of the hero. Justice always wins. Such a childishly idealistic belief was what I aimed to embody. Naturally, my dream was to be a hero. I wanted to be a cool, invincible hero who defeats villains. Until about 4th grade, I insisted a towel blanket was my cape and wore it proudly. I ran around the park with it, climbing high on playground equipment, ignoring my parents' warnings. Looking back now, those are some pretty embarrassing memories. Among my classmates, there was another guy who aspired to be a hero. His name was Steve. I prided myself on my passion for being a hero, but Steve's passion was no less intense. We often argued, insisting each of us was the number one hero. Our hero games often turned into fierce debates. Then I'll be the main hero. No way. I'm the main hero. Whenever my friends and I gathered to decide the lead role, Steve would always barge in like that. What are you talking about, Steve? You joined in the middle, so I'm the main hero. That's not a rule. I'm the main hero. Me? I'm the main hero. No, it's me. No, I am. No, it's me. It was a relentless back and forth, and we'd get so heated that adults had to intervene every time. Steve and I had a strange bond, first meeting in kindergarten. Even back then, he was always picking on me, and I was frankly sick of it. As a kid, I thought I'd see less of him in elementary school, but to my surprise, we ended up in the same class in the 1st grade, and it continued like that in the 2nd and 3rd grades. Turns out we were destined to be in the same class for all 9 years of mandatory education. We were always aware of each other, each striving not to lose to the other. It was a rivalry, but not in the noblest sense. Our fierce competition was probably most prominent in academics. Hey Mike, what did you get in math? He'd always come over to me after a test was returned. He seemed very confident that day, smiling broadly. What about you, Steve? Me? Look, I got 98. He proudly spread his test paper in front of me like he was showing off. The teacher said the highest score in the class was 98. Steve was so smug, sure of his victory. But unfortunately, the highest score simply means the top score. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's held by only one person. I got 98 too. I retorted with a smug look, just to crush his smile. By not making a fuss like him, I secretly took a mental victory over him. You, the same score. Really? That's boring. Maybe it's a mistake in the teacher's grading. You better be honest and report it if there's a mistake in your scoring. Our gazes clashed as if sparks were flying, glaring at each other intensely. Eventually, we both looked away, determined to win in other subjects next time. Whenever another test was returned, we'd meet again to compare scores. If one won, the other would find some excuse if he lost. This pattern repeated with every test. Our rivalry even manifested during the school sports festival. Despite being in the same class and team, we competed fiercely, refusing to lose to each other. We competed in everything, like who passed more people in the relay. Thanks to that, or perhaps not, our team won decisively every year. Our competition wasn't limited to studies and sports. We clashed in student council activities too. In 8th grade, we both ran for student council president. However, we were both soundly beaten by an annoyingly handsome guy who only ran as a joke. That was a bitter pill to swallow for both of us. In that way, we often fought so much that those around us wondered why we couldn't get along. To the question of why, neither of us had an answer. The ritual of competing with Steve, which started from our days vying for the hero's role, had become the norm. It wasn't that we didn't get along, but that's how it must have seemed from the outside. However, deep down, we each acknowledged the other as our greatest rival. We continued our rivalry in high school, competing in everything as expected. We'd probably compete in everything anyway, whether it be studies or the sports festival. We probably would have competed over who got into a more prestigious college. But then everything changed suddenly. In the fall of my freshman year of high school, my father passed away in a car accident. The suddenness of it plunged our family into deep grief. The photo of my father with a beaming smile, the lavish and large floral arrangements, and the sounds of soft sobs. I still vividly remember all of these things. What? The driver is claiming innocence? Yes, that's right. The accident was caused by the driver's reckless behavior. He was smoking with one hand, using his phone, and steering with the other, all while having consumed alcohol. His actions were extremely irresponsible, yet despite this, he claimed he was not at fault. Taking advantage of the fact that the victim was no longer alive, he made self-serving statements and never once apologized to the bereaved family. We were beyond angry, just utterly shocked. But with all the evidence, we believed we would be okay. The dash cam and nearby security camera footage clearly showed my father wasn't at fault, and that the driver was to blame. "Don't worry, I'll take responsibility and clear your father's name," said Bob, our lawyer. In this nightmare situation, he was incredibly supportive. Bob was a newcomer at a small law firm, but worked hard to honor my father's memory. Thanks to him, my father was publicly vindicated, and the driver faced severe punishment. Thank you, Bob. This will finally bring peace to my husband. We're truly grateful for everything, my family said, in tears, upon hearing the good news. Even after all this, the offender never apologized. But that was okay. The most important thing was that we were judged fairly. Besides, I had already begun to recover from my despair. The emotion that triggered this recovery was admiration. "Bob, I want to be a legal expert like you." "Like me?" That's an honor." "Do your best. I'll support you." He had cleared my father's name and saved my family from despair. To me, Bob was a true hero. Although different in form and approach from the hero I aspired to be as a child, the principle of saving people in trouble with justice remained the same. Since then, I decided to pursue a degree in law. I aimed for a challenging university and studied hard on my own every day. I should have felt fulfilled, but I noticed a slight sense of dissatisfaction. Not understanding the reason behind it, I continued to immerse myself in my studies. One day, when I mentioned my aspiration to study law, Steve was surprised. "Really, Mike? You're aiming for that law school too?" "You too, Steve? What, you want to compete with me?" It turned out his father was a lawyer, which inspired Steve to develop a strong sense of justice, just like me. Despite his foul mouth, I thought he might be more suited to be a dark hero rather than a regular one, but I kept that thought to myself. Now that Steve and I had the same goal, our competition was reignited. "Fine, I'll be the top entrant. Mike, you can just wail at my feet." "Sorry, but I can't let that happen. My dream is on the line." Thus, our competition to score higher on the entrance exams began. Determined to outdo each other, I studied harder than ever. Before I knew it, my dissatisfaction had vanished. Perhaps deep down, I craved this competition with him. Thanks to our hard work, both of us successfully passed the entrance exams. I was overjoyed to have moved a step closer to my dream, though it stung a bit to lose to Steve by a few points. As a law student, I worked hard. Competing with Steve made college life fulfilling. However, things took another turn. After my father's death, my mother, who had been working tirelessly, collapsed. It must have been the toll of years of hardship. A scholarship covered my tuition, and I managed living expenses with part-time jobs. But there were hospital bills for my mother and my twin younger brothers, who were preparing for high school entrance exams. They needed money for exam fees and, if they passed, tuition. I cut back on expenses and increased my work hours. My meals became increasingly frugal, and I quickly lost weight, worrying my friends. But I continued studying and working. Sometimes, I took night shifts for higher pay, even at the cost of sleep. "Mike, you can't keep this up. Your health won't last. Maybe you should take a break," friends and professors advised. I didn't listen. I was doing this for my family, but my overwork caught up to me, and I collapsed. "You're suffering from overwork. You need rest and should stop working part-time," said the doctor. "But my family needs me." "Calm down, Mike. If something happens to you, it's all for nothing." He was right. If I kept going like this, we all collapse. I thought deeply while receiving IV drips in the hospital. Realizing both my dreams and my family's needs was impossible for me. I had to choose. My heart decided immediately. I couldn't abandon my family. I decided to drop out of university and start working. During my last week at college, while handling paperwork, Steve confronted me. "Mike, is it true you're dropping out?" "You knew?" I hadn't told Steve to avoid demotivating him. "Why are you giving up? Just because you collapse? That's not enough reason." "It's part of it. There are other circumstances, Steve." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Lucky you, right? Now you can study without distractions. Don't joke around. Was your dream just that shallow?" His words echoed, but my decision was final. "I'm sorry," I said, unable to say anything more. Steve walked away, leaving me to silently watch his retreating back. Until I could earn a decent living, we managed with my father's savings and what I'd saved. It was tough, but my mother's health gradually improved, and my brothers advanced in their education. I resumed part-time work to support our living. Years passed. One day, while at the courthouse on an errand, I found myself in the restroom. It was clean, but there was a bit of dirt on the wash basin. Back when my mother was in the hospital, I did most of the housework, and I'd become particularly fond of cleaning. Without even thinking, I found myself tidying up. It had become a habit. Spotting a rag nearby, I couldn't leave the dirt alone. I took off my suit jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and wiped the area clean. As I finished cleaning the mirror, someone walked in. I stepped aside, quietly muttering, "Excuse me." When I looked up, I made eye contact with the newcomer through the mirror. He stopped in his tracks, eyes wide. "Mike, is that you?" The man wore a lawyer's badge on his collar. I recognized him immediately. Steve Burton, my rival since kindergarten. "Hey, Steve." "Long time, no see," I greeted, acknowledging the unexpected reunion. In contrast, Steve sneered at the sight of me holding a rag. "Bathroom cleaning? Did you quit law school to become a janitor?" "No, it's not like that," I began, but he kept mocking me. The guy who used to compete with me for the top spot ended up like this. He shook his head, clearly disappointed. Frustrated, I put away the rag. "You seem to be misunderstanding something." I washed my hands, dried them, and put my suit jacket back on. I turned to look him in the eyes. "I'm a judge, well, an associate judge, for now." Steve fell silent, his gaze flickering to the badge on my jacket. "A judge? You?" "Yes, you were the one who said it. Don't give up so easily." So, I didn't. Steve's face froze in astonishment. Years after dropping out of college, my twin brothers had entered high school and were planning their futures. My mother's health improved, requiring only occasional hospital visits. I continued juggling construction work and convenience store shifts to support us. Then, one day, my mother asked me to meet her at a cafe. "Remarrying?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, here he comes now," she replied, waving. I turned to see a man approaching, Dr. John Thompson, her primary physician. "Mike, I'm looking forward to our future together," John said, extending his hand. "Likewise," I replied. At first, it was awkward. But John proved to be kind and caring. My brothers quickly bonded with him and even expressed a desire to become doctors, inspired by their new stepfather. Though I worried about the costs, John generously offered to cover their education. With my responsibilities eased, I decided to return to law school and pursue the path I'd once put on hold. I re-enrolled, studied hard, and passed the bar exam on my first attempt. Now, as an associate judge, I knew there was more work to do, but I was back on track. Meeting Steve again after so many years, I told him my story. He listened in silence. "So that's what happened," he finally said, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry for what I said back then," he continued, his voice filled with regret. "I only pushed my ideals on you without understanding your situation." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Steve, don't be. You saying, 'Don't give up,' is what brought me back. I didn't want to give up, not after everything. And honestly, I didn't want to be a loser." Steve smiled slightly. "You've always been that way, always clawing your way back, always in my way." I laughed. "No, it was you who always tried to compete with me, wasn't it?" I responded with a smile to Steve's words. "Fine then, Mike, let's have another competition. Who will make it first? Me taking over my father's firm as a director, or you becoming a judge?" "I accept your challenge," I replied. "Just don't cry later." "Okay, that's my line," he retorted, glaring at me as sparks seemed to fly. After a few seconds of this, we both reached our limit and burst out laughing. "Ah ha ha. Oh man, we haven't changed a bit since we were kids." "Right, but this is us, isn't it?" I said, catching my breath, always trying to one-up each other. Looking forward to more of this, I added, "Steve, yeah, absolutely, same here." Our rivalry, which began when we were preschoolers and continued through our college years, wasn't going to end just because we had become adults. We would continue to compete and spur each other on. Without speaking, Steve and I exchanged a firm handshake, a silent agreement between us. Some time later, Steve and I began interacting more as friends, even drinking together. As we were approaching our 30s, I said, "Wow, you already have a wife and kids." Steve, already married and aiming to be a distinguished director for his family's sake, proudly began talking about his wife and kids. "Marriage is great, and kids are wonderful," he said with a smile. I couldn't compete with him in this regard. But instead of feeling envious or jealous, I just listened with a smile, finding it heartwarming. One day, Steve contacted me and invited me to his house for his daughter's birthday party. He seemed eager for me to attend, explaining that my name was well known as his rival, and they were all excited to meet me. When I arrived, I was guided to the living room, where I saw Steve's wife and daughter running around. "Hi, it's great to meet you." Steve's wife greeted me with a gentle smile. Their daughter, startled by my sudden appearance, clung to her mother's legs. Not wanting to scare her, I crouched down to her level. "Hello, what's your name?" I asked softly. Blushing, Emily hid behind her mother. Seeing this, Steve burst out laughing. "Ha ha. Mike, looks like she doesn't like you. Why are you so happy about that?" I joked as Steve picked Emily up, calming her down. She looked at me and finally said, "My name's Emily." "How old are you, Emily?" Emily ran to the back of the living room, proudly holding up her birthday card above her head. 3, she cheered. Over the course of several hours, Emily warmed up to me. She even brought a book and sat on my lap. "Read this, please," she said, handing me the book. "Okay, sure thing," I replied, reading to her. Afterward, Emily politely thanked me. It was surprising to see such manners in a 3-year-old. As I patted her head and praised her, she hopped around joyfully. Watching her, I thought to myself that having kids might be nice. As the evening approached and it was time to say goodbye, Emily clung to my pants. "Are you leaving already?" she asked. No, don't go." It seemed I had become unusually attached to her in just one day. "Come on, don't trouble him," Steve said, picking her up. Emily looked like she might cry. "Emily, I'll come to play again." "Okay," I promised. I extended my pinky finger, and she did the same, making a pinky promise to meet again. Then, in a surprising gesture, Emily kissed me on the cheek. I turned, stunned, and saw Steve's face turning red. "Hey, Mike, what's that about? Don't come here again. I won't let you see Emily anymore," he shouted. Emily, defying her father, shouted loudly, "Why would you say that? I hate Daddy." At that, I was completely confused about how to react. Emily was crying, Steve was red-faced, and his wife was smiling at the chaos unfolding at the doorway. The goodbye at the entrance turned into such a chaotic scene. As a busy judge, my days were filled with responsibilities. This job carried a great deal of weight. My decisions impacted people's lives. But with great responsibility came great fulfillment. I was determined to be a respectable judge, fulfilling the dream I had worked so hard to achieve. I owed my perseverance to the people around me, my father, who always worked hard for us, Bob, who cleared my father's name and introduced me to the world of law, my mother, who continued to support me warmly even after falling ill, John, who encouraged me, and above all, Steve, who urged me never to give up. And now, my beloved Emily. As I thought about it, I saw how much these folks helped to sustain my life. I would continue to be a respectable judge and aim for perfection for their benefit. I promised myself this as I drove home from work and looked up at the beautiful sky.